A kiss is just a kiss, right? Well, according to modern Hollywood, a kiss can lead to all kinds of problems. And that's what we are here to discuss today, how DEI ruined romance in all of our favorite movies and TV series. In the early days of cinema, love stories were an essential component of film, a reflection of the human experience. At the heart of many of these stories was the intimate kiss, a moment of connection that conveyed passion, desire, or sometimes even tragedy. However, over the years, creative mandates meant to empower women have slowly started to interfere with the mechanics of storytelling. Today we're going to explore how these changes, particularly the issue of the kissing scene between a man and a woman, and how it is negatively impacting the narrative power of film and television. In the past, kissing scenes were not just about romance. They were about power dynamics, character motivations, and emotional conflict. Take, for instance, early cinema, where men were often portrayed as leaders, heroes, or figures of authority. In these films, men frequently initiated a kiss, showcasing their competency and ability to lead. This wasn't just about attraction, it was about illustrating the social norms of the time. But as society evolved, so did the representation of relationships in films. Men, particularly the bad boys or villainous characters, would often be the ones who initiated kissing, exploring darker, more exciting, albeit dangerous relationships. Characters like Count Dracula or even Mark Wahlberg's David in the feature film Fear, released in 1996, illustrates this perfectly, where women are lured into relationships with dangerous men, offering cautionary lessons about the choices women make in who they choose to get romantically involved with. Then came the feminist movement's influence on Hollywood. Critics called out the industry for reducing women to mere objects of desire, prizes to be won by men. One of the most notorious examples of this is from Goldfinger, released in 1964, where Sean Connery's James Bond physically subdues the character Pussy Galore, forcing a kiss that reflects the pervasive gender imbalances in Hollywood. Some may view this scene as two international spies engaging in round of foreplay, but others saw this as a male forcing himself on an unwilling female. But as women gained more autonomy, the portrayal of female sexuality in film began to shift. Women were empowered to take charge of their romantic and sexual lives. Shows like Sex and the City, which premiered in 1998, revolutionized the way women were depicted in relationships, with characters who freely explored their desires without being defined by them. Women were no longer passive recipients of male affection. They were in control. And this is where things started to get complicated. Women were empowered to make their own sexual choices, but at the same time, the notion that men wanting sex from women was oppressive gained traction. This created a paradox. If women were empowered to desire sex, but men wanting sex was oppressive, how could both coexist in a socially progressive Hollywood? The answer? Creative mandates. Hollywood's solution was to implement rules that required kissing scenes to be initiated by women, framing it as an expression of female autonomy. But this solution comes with significant consequences. This mandate does several things. First, it forces writers to compromise their stories, characters, and motivations just to appease a creative requirement. The narrative can often feel forced, hollow, or disconnected from the character's natural progression. Second, it robs male characters of their agency and the traditional masculine trait of taking initiative. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, it strips away the nuanced ways that a kiss can convey different meanings, emotions, and plot developments. Let's take a closer look at the 1999 feature film The Mummy, written and directed by Stephen Sommers, a film that features several kissing scenes, each with its own distinct narrative purpose. But under today's mandates, each of these scenes would face major scrutiny. Let's break them down. Spoiler alert, none of these kisses would make it past a modern sensitivity reader. First up, we've got the forbidden romance between Imhotep and Ankh-Sunamun. It's Romeo and Juliet if Romeo was a 3,000-year-old mummy and Juliet was, well, also not in a great position. Their tragic romance sets the entire plot into motion, giving us insight into Imhotep's motivations as he seeks to resurrect his lost love. Today, this might be criticized for not empowering Ankh-Sunamun, since she's portrayed as a passive character whose fate is dictated by men. While the kiss is problematic by modern standards, it's essential for establishing the emotional stakes of the movie. Without this kiss, the movie is just a bunch of people in dusty tombs looking for treasure. Next, we've got Rick's introduction to Evie. He's in a jail cell, moments from being executed, and he decides to just grab Evie and kiss her. This bold moment shows his defiance in the face of death, hinting at the chemistry between him and Evie. However, today's standards would likely see this as problematic since it lacks clear consent. It could be interpreted as objectification, as Rick takes control of the moment without regard for Evie's feelings. Yet, it's important to remember that the scene is meant to build tension and flirtation. After a long, treacherous commute to the land of the dead, a drunk Evie confesses her attraction to Rick and leans in to kiss him, only to pass out before it happens. Rick shows restraint and does not take advantage of her, reinforcing his respect for her. While this moment demonstrates Rick's morality, in today's climate, it could be seen as problematic because it implies that Evie's desire, when intoxicated, isn't fully valid. It also reflects a more dated attitude toward women's autonomy, where their actions are often framed as needing correction or guidance. Next, after conjuring up Mummy, our characters retreat back to their hotel. Rick carries Evie to safety and locks her in a room to protect her, which at first glance might seem like a chivalrous act. However, in modern times, this could be viewed as taking away Evie's agency, turning her into a passive figure needing protection. Today's storytelling often emphasizes characters making their own choices, and Evie being physically removed and locked in a room might not resonate well in a world that prioritizes mutual respect and equality. Imhotep sneaks into Evie's room and kisses her while she's asleep, demonstrating his villainy and furthering his plot to use her as a vessel to resurrect his love. This moment shows just how little regard Imhotep has for Evie as a person. Today, this scene would be heavily criticized for being a clear violation of consent and objectifying Evie. It also highlights how the film uses the kiss to push forward the stakes. Imhotep is the true villain, and this act makes his motivations even more sinister. In today's world, Imhotep would need a "do not enter" sign for this kind of behavior. If he tried it in a modern film, he'd be the HR department's worst nightmare. There's no gray area here. This is straight up non-consensual. If this scene were remade, Imhotep would never make contact and Evie would need to save herself. Next, Evie kisses Imhotep to distract him from killing Rick and her friends with a giant sandstorm. While it's an empowered move, it's still a bit problematic because it's a kiss used to manipulate a man's actions. While modern audiences might appreciate that Evie is in control of the situation, the underlying implication is that she's using her sexuality to save someone else. Ironically, Evie is making the choice. It's the age-old trope of using your charm to distract a bad guy and save the hero, but there would still be some discomfort about her using her feminine wiles to save Rick. It's a fine line, and in 2025 this might get a "let's rethink this" from the studio. And finally, after literally saving the world and fighting off bugs, curses, and supernatural mummies, Rick and Evie share a kiss as they ride off into the sunset. A classic moment romance, adventure, and the promise of a future together. But, of course, today's world would be like, so she needed a man to rescue her? Great. Let's deconstruct that. This kiss, in 2025, would probably get an immediate "but Evie is strong on her own" rewrite. Maybe they'd ride off in separate cars. Who knows? Each of these kisses was necessary for the film's story. They served to develop the characters, move the plot forward, and explore different aspects of love, power, and autonomy. But imagine if these scenes were altered to fit today's creative mandates. The movie would lose its depth, its character complexity, and ultimately its emotional resonance. Creative mandates like the female-initiated kiss might sound progressive on the surface, but they fail to understand the nuanced ways that intimate moments, like a kiss, can shape a story. Instead of empowering women, these mandates often undermine storytelling, restricting the roles and development of both men and women in ways that feel artificial and disconnected from the characters' true motivations. As we move forward in cinema and TV, let's be cautious about making rules that stifle creativity in the name of empowerment. True progress doesn't mean constraining narrative possibilities. It means allowing stories to evolve naturally, with space for diverse perspectives, complicated characters, and real human moments.
God, aren't you even going to kiss her goodbye?
No.